Oh, it has been a hot minute, a little bit longer than we like to,
Yes,
a
yes.
little bit longer,
Yeah.
but we're back, and we made no promises.
No,
You know, we
no.
we we are beholden to no masters,
But
Mark.
but we are at episode 10. I feel like
Episode 10.
that's like a milestone, at least
Absolutely.
first one of hopefully many, as we
Yeah.
continue this journey forward.
And we've passed. I hope this doesn't impress or unimpress people, but it's just a thing. I haven't told you that we roared past 1,000 downloads for the podcast
Nice.
a week or two
Nice.
ago. So
Oh, that's awesome.
pe- people are listening somewhere, which
Yeah,
I love.
yeah, yep. Nope, every time I talk about it, people are always, pretty jazzed about it, so, I think that's, we're doing some good work here, Doug, is what I
We're
think.
doing some great work.
Yes,
So,
yes.
who are we? I am Doug Park. You are Mark Rudkowski. This is the Amazon Connect podcast, episode 10. And to bring in this auspicious 10th episode, we have proficiency based routed into the podcast nobody but Mark Rudkowski himself, who
That's right.
has, we've arrived at your, I won't call it pet topic, your area of deep expertise and
Expertise.
specialization.
Yeah, people
So,
may not know, but I've been, when we launched Amazon Connect back in 2017, the first partner integration that we did with Salesforce,
it was
and we
indeed.
launched with that, and particularly at that point in time, we needed a robust agent experience to build our CCP into, and why not pick the largest, most popular CRM in the market today, and that's what we went with.
So the reason we're focusing on your Salesforce specialization and expertise with regard to Amazon Connect is last week you were at Dreamforce,
It was, yes.
the big party.
It
Tell
was.
us
It
all
was. It
about
was.
it.
It was a big party. So, for folks who don't know, Dreamforce is once a time. Once kind of like what we have with reInvent every year, and at that weekly event, it's usually about 3 days. People come in usually Monday, head out Thursday and Friday. It's where I'm not sure what the number is this year, but we'll just say 50,000 people descend into San
Mhm.
Francisco, and it's in the Moscone Center and east and west and north and south. I forget, but anyways, it's all
A lot
across
of,
that whole area, across some of the
yeah,
hotels that are in that area. So if you've never been, it can be a little overwhelming in
I
terms
bet.
of the number of people that suddenly you're you're just trying to understand where do I go, what kind what sessions do I go see, who do I go talk to,
Yeah.
finding
A
the
session you want to see in 10 minutes could be half an hour away.
100%. And so it's it's a little bit easier, I think, than reInvent, because reInvent we tend to have the challenge of the hotels in Las Vegas, right? And those are spread out a little bit.
And they're almost intended for you not to be able to leave that easily.
Correct. Yeah. And so at least with Dreamforce, it's a little bit less of that, right? You still do a ton of walking. I think I did somewhere around like 20,000 steps a day just to
Mhm.
get around and meet with customers. For me, it's pretty much from when I get there, it's just nonstop in terms of meeting with customers. I actually had a presentation, which we'll talk about in a few. It's working at the booth as well, right? Because we have a
Yeah,
fairly
yeah.
large AWS booth there, so it's often customers want to meet you there also, and so and obviously you have sort of the drive-by customers too that we're wanting to meet with and talk there as well. So yeah, so it's a like I said, it's an eye-opening experience for folks if you've never been there before. If you've been to a few of these before, you kind of get it down and you get to the rhythm of just working out your schedule.
Yeah. Yeah. So with let's talk about why what are you talking about when you're there? What's the main top? Like, I mean, obviously
Sure.
the integration between the two.
Yeah.
What's interesting about it at the moment? What was
So
this year's?
yeah, so this year's main theme on from the Salesforce side was the agentic enterprise. Shocking, right?
Mm,
Like, and
mm,
from that perspective, so obviously Salesforce talks a lot about Agentforce, right? That is their core agentic platform that they have, they leverage as part of their core CRM experience. This year, we actually they announced an integration with Amazon Connect, where so today a lot of customers are using Agentforce, and what they're doing is essentially what Salesforce is enabling is the ability to add, traditionally you've been able to use just chat with Agentforce, and now they've added a voice channel to it as well. And similar to what we see with other voice AI solutions out there, we essentially announced with them, essentially the ability to now integrate that into Amazon Connect. And so that's coming later this year, actually early next year, around January, in terms of being able to more or less support, what we call third party voice agents into Amazon Connect.
And so, can you give us a flavor of what that experience might look like from
Sure.
either an agent, as in a human agent, that word now it's
Hmm.
you've got to qualify it every time you talk about it, the human agent, or
Yes.
for the human customer,
Yeah.
what that might look like,
So,
just as a
so think of this as so you've got an end customer. They're calling into your contact center, right? In this case, obviously Amazon Connect. As the call comes in, you're going to have Lex and potentially QIC, driving
Mhm,
that self service experience.
mhm.
It may then trigger an intent that will then you want to pass off to an agent force agent, right? That is essentially going to more or less, solve, for example, it might be handling a sophisticated case workflow, right? So you've built a very specific agent force agent that's part of that. And essentially now, because it's voice enabled, essentially we would, transfer that call over to that essentially agent force agent. They would have that interaction with the end customer if they solve it, right? In terms of that initial interaction, great. Hang up the call, right? You've contained the call from that perspective. If it needs to be escalated to an agent, that call then gets passed back into Connect, and then we essentially escalate that through. In this case, because Salesforce is the unified agent experience, we're essentially passing that up to the agent to solve the remainder of the issue as part of that integration.
So, how integrated at launch will that so once Q and Connect, I believe once the self service has identified the correct tool. So in this case, okay, tool, go and hit. Are we talking similar to like it's like an MCP that it's talking to, or
No,
in the case of the
it's not. It's so
Salesforce agent?
there's different interaction models that we can think about here, right? In this case, with Agentforce Voice, it's more of a voice to voice interaction model that we've got. So in terms of we're using our enterprise voice transfer capability to
Hmm.
transfer that call right from Connect into the Agentforce Voice agent at that point.
Wow. Okay, I
Yeah.
had not grasped that. So the
Yes.
voice is actually
Correct. Yes. And so
okay.
now one of the things we are working with Salesforce on is we also are looking at also so how do we look at agent collaboration capabilities
Hmm.
as well, right? So that's another area in terms of Salesforce actually announced this week their platform MCP server capabilities,
Yeah.
which essentially wraps a lot of their core Salesforce APIs. For example, I want to be able to create a case. I want to be able to look up an
Yes.
account.
Yes.
So now, what we're looking at in terms of integrating that is, we would essentially now be able to, from Connect, leveraging QIC, essentially be able to, call out into, ultimately into, or if you're using Agent Core today, you could do something similar to that, right? But essentially call out to this remote MCP server on the Salesforce side. And that's going to be that's more of a data interaction, right? That you'll
Yeah.
have, right? From that perspective. So there'll be, this agent collaboration set of capabilities interesting in terms of it can happen at the channel level, it can happen at the agent level, and obviously we're continuing, that's an area we're continuing to work closely with Salesforce on as well in terms of you got MCP, you've got A2A, right? You've got all these protocols right around and for folks who don't know, it's you got agent to agent model context protocol. These are just interop standards that are being developed that allow essentially, these AI agents to have an interaction with each other, typically around a data interaction, or it might be around reasoning, right? Some type of reasoning in terms of, handing that over to this CRM agent that's going to execute some sophisticated workflow within your CRM, right? Or it could just be looking up information, from the
And so
CRM level.
that data interaction is something we've spoken about in the past, which is that the the human agent may still be handling the interaction with the customer,
Yes.
but
Yes.
the desktop is actually going off and doing a whole bunch of tasks to
Yeah.
assist that agent
So there
going
can be
looking things up.
multiple touch points, right, that we can have right across the contact center and the CRM in terms of how these integrate, with each other. So it's, obviously we've got the IVR, right, in terms of, in terms of through flows, in terms of where you can have that interaction, which again, it's super important around that, having that level of personalization, when a customer calls in, we have capabilities like customer profiles that can also dip into, Salesforce to pull that information from that perspective, or to be honest, from multiple CRMs, right? If you want to leverage that and you have, often what we see with a lot of customers is they have multiple CRMs, or
Oh,
their
yes.
customer data is in multiple stores, right,
Billing
across the
platforms
enterprise.
could be, yeah,
Yes, yes, exactly.
ERPs. Yep,
Yep.
yep.
Yeah. So part of that is really it simplifies that from a connect perspective, and particularly when you need that fast access to the data, that is super important as well, right? So you need to ensure that, particularly when we start to, when you think about LLMs and that ability to have that personalized, responsive, you know, um, discussion that you want to have, with an end customer, having that data resident is super important, right? Because that's what optimizes that performance. And so you'll see that pattern, you know, not only within Connect, but you see it within Salesforce as well, in terms of that. So there's an element of how do you optimize that as we think about the overall CX experience across your contact center and your CRM.
Now I'm already hearing customers cry. I can hear them now as I sit in Singapore and look out the window.
Yes,
I heard
I
one
can.
just
I
now
think I hear. I
say,
think I hear them from here too.
they're saying, "But Mark, but Doug, I've already purchased Service Cloud Voice.
Mhm.
How does this fit in?"
So, um, so a couple things. One is, so Service Cloud Voice has been renamed. So just yeah, so that 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 muscle where learn to basically have that ingrained into my head at this point. It's they've now changed it essentially to, instead of Service Cloud Voice, it is now Salesforce Voice, and the reason because is now it's not just enabled as part of Service
Of
Cloud,
course,
it's
yes,
Sales and
yeah.
Service Cloud, right? So calling it Service Cloud Voice doesn't make a ton of sense. So they renamed it to Salesforce Voice. I will probably continue to mess that up for the foreseeable 6 months, but
Well,
nonetheless,
and I think the primary use case would be for Service Cloud.
yes,
I
one
mean,
hundred
while
percent.
you do see it in Education Cloud and some
Yes,
others coming
yeah,
up, but
exactly,
yeah,
exactly. You say it's it's a pretty common pattern from that perspective, but it, it is, I think it is something that as we continue to invest into this integration and actually let me back up a second. Let me talk about the integration because I know we've talked about it on some earlier podcasts, but it might be worth just kind of reminding folks of the journey that we've gone through,
it bears
as
repeating.
part of that
Yeah,
integration. So when we launched back in 2017, we developed what we call the CTI adapter. The
still
Amazon
used
Connect
by many
sent, yeah,
customers.
yeah, exactly.
Many customers.
Many customers still use that today.
Yep,
So we use that uh, in terms of really having that embedded CCP experience, within Salesforce. And we started with that, and like to your point,
and it's
it's
still free.
still
Still
free.
free.
Yeah, from that perspective. And then Salesforce, shortly thereafter saw, how, one, the fact that Connect was a native native cloud solution. Can I talk today? Cloud solution, in terms of how that was, embedded in terms of, leveraging that through the contact center experience and the speed at which you could deploy that. That's actually when we developed that prototype with Salesforce, in terms of that, they saw how easy it was compared to other contact center platforms, how easy it was to stand it up, deploy it, and integrate it into the CRM experience. They were like, wow, this is amazing, game changing. So we literally built a prototype of what is, essentially Salesforce Voice. We did that
Mm,
we did that initial prototype with them in a week.
yeah,
And
right.
right, and so when we did that, they were super impressed with how that speed at which we could enable that, those voice capabilities. And the goal initially of, at that point, Service Cloud Voice, which now, aka now known as Salesforce
Salesforce
Voice,
voice.
is
Yeah,
the essentially the core aspect of this is they wanted a more native Salesforce experience. They had their digital channels, and they still have, Salesforce today still has Salesforce Chat and other related channels around
yes,
that,
yeah.
but they don't have telephony, right? And that was the advantage that we brought, obviously, is bringing that core global telephony set of capabilities into the CRM experience, and that is
And
essentially.
I don't think it's a controversial statement to say that they set about attempting to make sure they kept control of those channels and as much of the AI services, which at the time was really limited to Einstein.
Mhm, mhm.
But to make sure that their customers did not wander off from chat, did not wander off from Einstein. Hey, Connect, we want to use you just for voice, which is part of the flexibility of Connect. We are
100%,
we
100%.
yeah,
And at the time, and again, a lot of our customers were using CTI adapter, right? So, in terms of, capabilities, Salesforce had, Salesforce Voice, we had CTI adapter, you know, all good.
And in the very early days of Service Cloud Voice, I'm pretty sure we hadn't even launched chat yet.
We had not.
So
Yeah, I'm
it
pretty
was
sure it
actually
was
a
around
really,
2020, so it was pretty close. It was around that time, but
but it was a pretty neat little
yes,
fit, actually.
yes, exactly, exactly. So it was great in terms of it's actually we've had a lot of success with that integration. We're actually we're by far the largest contact center integration with Salesforce today. We're well over 10x, right, in terms of size, in terms of any other partner that's done an integration into Salesforce. We have close to 1,000 customers on it, and well over 100,000 agents that are actively using it today. Seeing a lot of we've had a lot of success. Fast forward, we'll say to about 2023. What we started to hear from customers is great. We have the CTI adapter. Salesforce was starting to signal to partners like ourselves as well as customers that they were limiting investment into that CTI, that underlying open API the open CTI API that they have that powers our CTI adapter capabilities. So they've started to think like, we're eventually going to, more or less, stop investing and eventually start to move away from that. And given that, right, and recommend to customers that you should go to, Service Cloud Voice. Now, from our perspective, that was a limitation because, what customers are saying, well, it's great, that you have the voice capabilities and Service Cloud Voice, but we want more than that, right? We want your chat. We want some of your AI capabilities, right? So we want all of those things enabled as part of the integration. We essentially then worked with them to build what we just launched back in March, which is the Salesforce Contact Center with Amazon Connect. And what that is think of that as an add-on package that we've built that installs on top of Salesforce Voice and allows you to extend the core capabilities within Salesforce Voice with Connect capabilities. So now we've brought them back together and unified them, in terms of those set of capabilities.
I the reason I raised earlier that the initial launch of what was then Service Cloud Voice, what is
Mhm.
now Salesforce Voice, that was to block out or to hold on to chat and email and the AI services
Mhm.
for Salesforce
Mhm.
meant that over time there were enough customers and edge cases, or maybe not even that edge cases, where the customer was saying, "Well, I don't want to work exactly like that.
Right.
We like the look of Service Cloud
Mhm.
Voice,
Mhm.
and we like the look of Salesforce Voice, but
Yes.
actually we already do chat through Connect, or we've put a lot of effort into some AI services and some other applications
Mhm.
through Connect that we would like to use."
Yes.
And so that I found interesting, and it speaks very highly of Salesforce that they recognized that it can't be one size fits all.
Mhm. No,
Like at a
exactly.
certain point, you're going to have to walk away from deals if you're going to try and say to customers, you've got to change the way you're working to fit our product.
100%. 100%. And what I like to do when we talk about Salesforce Voice, I almost like to call that like CTI 2.0. Right,
Hmm.
because
Yep.
it's essentially it's it's not only an offering, right, that they have in terms of capabilities, focused on the contact center, but it is also an underlying platform set of APIs, right, that we now can build upon. So again, we were the first contact center to integrate into that. Right, we actually helped them architect the majority of that integration today as well. So again, just showing we work super closely with them from a product perspective in terms of
Hmm.
how we co-build this type of experience overall. So it's been a very successful joint partnership from that perspective, and that's something again as we continue to roll out SCCAC, with customers. We're onboarding a number of Lighthouse customers this year. We're seeing a lot of success with that as well. So we're off
And
to a great start.
I like the use of the word partnership there because when it launched, I think there was a hope, an aspiration from our side that and an intention that this was a Salesforce product. The Service Cloud Voice and Salesforce Voice would be ultimately a Salesforce product that would just be another part of what they sell, and they would be responsible for the marketing and the demonstrations and the explanations to customers. And I don't know what you found, being far more experienced than I am in this area, but I dealt with most of the customers in Australia and New Zealand who've gone to and was involved at some point in those the sales and the deployment of those. Salesforce were not capable of doing it by themselves. It just wasn't their area of expertise.
Mhm, mhm.
They just can't. They didn't know how to have the conversations with, say, the workforce management people or the contact center managers. These were just not in the same way. I would be very incapable of having a deep discussion about CRM,
Right.
which I
Mhm.
know Salesforce is more than a CRM,
Right.
but it is a
But
core
it is
capability.
their core competency, right?
Yes,
As we
yeah,
would say. Yes. Yes. And
yeah.
that is actually one of the, I think one of the key, this better together story that we have, with Salesforce is that is simple because, to be honest, it's, when you have to, traditionally in the old times, where you could use a CTI adapter, which was good, right? But it was fairly limited in terms of what you could integrate with. And now, between, what you're building in terms of your IVR experience, what you're now, as we see agentic capabilities now coming, fast and furious into the contact center and the CRM. And
Hmm.
then you have your unified agent experience. And,
Yeah,
for Connect, for us, we look at this as meeting the agent where they are. Right.
yeah, yep.
So, so we look at that in sort of like three core modalities. And obviously, we have our out of the box agent workspace, which, we have a lot of customers who use that, use it, love it, right, and have that
We did
enabled.
an entire episode on it, and I
We
think
did.
we probably need to do a revisit on that one pretty soon
Probably,
because more
yes.
and more things.
Exactly, around that. And then we have integrations like Salesforce, right, which is essentially for customers who are primarily using the CRM as that unified agent experience, right? So they've made a decision, right, and we have a number of contact centers that, agent population one at CRM, and that's being the unified experience and reducing the complexity that they have on their agent desktop. And then finally, custom, right? So we often say, a number of customers that have built their own, you know, agent desktop and they want to leverage that as part of that, and basically just use our APIs and integrate that as part of that, custom desktop they often may have already built, right? And from that perspective, and we're more or less just plugging into what they've already enabled as part of their contact center experience. So again, that meet the agent where they are, that flexibility is super important. The the other aspect of that too is the fact that we've talked about this before with unlimited AI, right? Which to remind folks, that's essentially a set of capabilities that that we have within Connect, ranging from contact lens to queue and connect to our screen recording capabilities to our
Agent
workforce management,
evaluations,
agent
workforce management.
evaluations,
Yep.
right? And so pulling that all together more or less into a single SKU, right? That makes it easier for our customers to, essentially basically pay per minute, right? In terms of that usage and leveraging that across, their entire contact center. And the advantage of that now too with with this integration that we have with SCCAC is the fact that you can take advantage of that there as well, right? So you have that flexibility, so again, that's something too. When we look at this, is we want to enable those core Connect capabilities, deeply within experience. And you'll see later this year, for example, we're going to be releasing our QIC agent assist capabilities natively
Hmm.
within Salesforce, right? And so that's
Oh,
yes. So that's going to be, so now today you can already build your self-service interaction through QIC within the
yeah.
IVR experience. And now, you'll be able to expand that all the way to the Salesforce agent experience as well.
And without getting too ahead of my skis, does that mean that would be available in all third-party desktops if you chose to build it, or is it?
I mean,
Is
I
it?
mean, the QIC widget, I'll use that term, right, is essentially you can embed that in any third party experience from that perspective. So, the short answer to that is yes. Obviously,
Mm,
when we integrate this into SCCAC within Salesforce, we're optimizing it right within that experience. So, looking at how do we integrate that into the existing experience that's there is also, leveraging the existing Salesforce information. Because again, traditionally, customers are going to be, for example, they want to tie that to their Salesforce knowledge bases. So
yes.
when a call, or chat comes in, when it's pulling those recommendations, it's pulling them from the knowledge bases that are already within Salesforce, right? Because that's most of those customers are using that now. If you have knowledge bases and other repositories, that's fine, right? We can pull that into QIC and leverage those as well.
And you have a neat interface that I think is just becoming more and more powerful for managing the prompts
Mhm.
through
Yes,
Amazon Connect. And
exactly.
that the more customers I work with on QIC, both self-service and agent assist, the more the more I recognize the importance of getting your prompting right. So it could be even things like, so let's say you uploaded it your Salesforce knowledge base.
Mm-hmm.
There may be information in there that you need to change the context of,
Mm-hmm.
and the easiest place to do that without changing the core information or the original RAG information is to do that in the prompt. So something like, don't tell someone to the in order to handle something they can call us on this number because they're already calling us on this number.
Right. Mm-hmm.
That might be the information that's on the website or in the knowledge store or in the, keep remind the agent or the agent through the prompt that the context here is this person is calling.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Therefore,
Exactly.
don't tell them they should call for help.
Exactly.
Just a simple example.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I do think one of those things there is the fact that the it's part of this is the ease at which we try to enable those capabilities and make that
Hmm.
super simple, right? In terms of trying to
Yeah,
deploy this and enable this out of the box overall, with leveraging QIC, but also the fact that I think one of the best things that to your point is that the structure of that knowledge base and how well you've optimized the
yeah,
structure of
yeah.
that is makes a huge difference in terms of the
A huge
the
difference.
impact that'll have for your agents, right? And that's something that I think as we look at best practices, that's something we definitely we constantly work with customers on to ensure that they've done some due diligence, right, around
Yeah.
ensuring that the structure of their knowledge bases are in the best possible way.
So, Mark, we have, by our own made up rules, 3
Yes.
minutes left.
Yes.
Um, the If a customer is listening to this and gets excited, let's say they're an existing Salesforce customer, they think actually this sounds amazing. I want to get going on this.
Hmm.
How do they do that? Do they talk to us? Do they talk to Salesforce? What's the path?
So the good news is they can talk to either of us from that perspective,
Look
right?
at that.
Look at that. So absolutely, both our field teams, the Salesforce field teams, right? They know this capability that we have, in terms of Salesforce Voice, SCCAC overall. So reach out to either of those. We can definitely, and again, ping me on LinkedIn if you have, or Doug, right? We'll put you in contact with the right folks if you can't find them. But it should be fairly straight. It's again we're fairly the teams know our disintegration really well. They can work with you super closely in terms of enabling it. And just so folks know, right, like part of the when you to leverage this integration, right, and I always like to kind of explain some of the licensing aspect of this is typically you'll need the service, well, the Salesforce voice license, right?
Hmm.
It's a per
Hmm.
agent license. And then you also need what Salesforce calls a digital engagement license. So you need those two licenses. And then essentially the package that installs into Salesforce voice is essentially a free package that we offer through the App Exchange. It's actually seamlessly integrated into Salesforce voice. So the install process is relatively straightforward. Once you set that up, then it's typical pay as you go around the integration that you have there. So you'll hear the term BYO, bring your own Amazon,
Hmm.
right, from that
Yep.
perspective. So that's the license that you want to leverage for this integration, at least today.
Yeah. Awesome. Is there anything else you wanted to cover before we wrap it up? Anything else you want to let the people know about?
No, I'll just say, if you've hadn't had a chance to, go to Dreamforce, definitely put that on your list for next year.
Who was the big act? Because I know historically there's been like the Beach Boys
Metallica,
and
yeah, Metallica
Metallica.
was the big act this year. So yes,
That's pretty good.
which is
That's
pretty
pretty
cool.
good.
Yes, yeah. So it's pretty cool. And I do want to also shout out, like we had the presentation that I was part of, that we did. It was we actually did the presentation that I did was we were talking again a lot about sort of the value, more so a lot of what we just walked through, but essentially how do you enhance your contact center with Salesforce and AWS and a lot of the agentic trends and capabilities. So that might be even worth a whole podcast onto itself as well. And I, we presented that with my peer from the product side on the Salesforce side, Priya Saxena. I was actually, this is always the best laid plans, right? I had actually brought the podcast kit with me to Dreamforce. And I'm like,
Yes.
we're gonna do some
Do it
recording on
live.
site and do it
Yeah.
live.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, none
Yeah.
of that happened.
Okay.
because
All right.
it's just the days go by like that, right? Like next
Yeah,
thing you
it's
know,
hectic.
it's 11 o'clock at night, and but we'll definitely bring on, I think a few of these folks later for sure. We'll do, I think we definitely get some, follow up topics here. And we actually co presented with James Loomis, the CTO of Bionic, who's
Wow.
one of our key customers there. And, he walked through his journey that he had, and we did actually a Q&A session. And, so it was overall great. And the cool thing was I actually did it in a movie theater. So
That
this,
is cool.
this is the first time I'd ever, I mean, we present all over the place, and
Yeah,
this was definitely the first doing in that. So to kick things off, I actually, and I probably broke some IP rules, I'm sure here, but because we were in a movie theater, figured, well, it was, apropos to basically play the Star Wars theme as a kickoff, for that. And so, we had to get the ball rolling with that. And and people had the recliner seats, they were super comfy. So I don't think anybody
in
fell
full
asleep.
use. Anyone have any popcorn?
That's exactly what some people did have popcorn. So it was actually it was perfect from that perspective.
It is funny. It reminds me when one of the larger sort of organised or disorganised events in Melbourne is the Melbourne annual Melbourne Comedy Festival, and it's a similar thing where any venue becomes a venue. Any potential, like
Yes.
there's cloakrooms and things like that
Yes.
that hold 6 seats where someone might be doing a comedy show, like all
Exactly.
around town. There's just
Exactly.
anything, any available space.
Yeah. And
Well,
one other thing I'll
yeah,
call out. I know we were a minute over, but
no, it's no. Go right
the
ahead.
if you wanted to see a good synopsis of what was announced, from an AWS and
Yeah,
Salesforce perspective, Ruba Bono and Brian Linsman actually put together a blog, partner blog post. So we'll add that link when we
definitely
post the
in the
episode.
notes.
But it's a
Yeah,
really good sort of just walkthrough in terms of a lot of the announcements. I mean, I probably touched on like that much of it, in terms of
sure.
all the
Yeah,
exciting stuff going on.
that's fantastic. Thank you, Mark. And you made me feel a little like I'm without a specialty. Like I was thinking, well, when's what I do in the Doug episode? You know,
Well, we'll
a
find
day in
something
the
for you,
life
Doug.
of a solution architect. Like, who cares
Actually,
about that?
I think that would be a fascinating episode. I think people would be
I
really
guarantee you
intrigued.
it's not. It's exactly what you think it
I don't
is.
think you're giving yourself enough credit, Doug. I think we need to, step up the bar there. I think people will really appreciate it.
I need a demo for tomorrow. It needs to do everything, and it needs to be customized. Oh,
I mean, you can
okay.
just a day in the life of Doug. Like this is, I feel like people are like, are going to be clamoring.
They're
Like,
calling out for it. It's what the
they're saying,
people want.
we absolutely want to hear that episode. So we'll plan that
All
for a
right.
future one.
Well, with that, Mark. Oh, we didn't even do updates at the top of
Well,
the
that's
show.
the
We'll
thing.
have to
We
do an
did.
update episode next.
Yes, we'll have to
Yeah.
do. Yes, we'll definitely do that. We'll play
Maybe
catch
do a
up
skinny
on a few of
update
those.
show. Yeah.
One other thing I think we'll also remind folks, Doug, is back. Like I know again, we're talking about Dreamforce, right? Great, oh, goodness.
Mm-hmm.
But reInvent's coming
Oh,
too,
yes.
right? So
Yes.
reInvent's right around.
Reinvent.
This is my favorite time of year, right? As we like to
Yeah.
say, it's Christmas for AWS, right?
Yeah, it
So
is.
what you'll see is the just tons of new updates and releases and new features that we'll be announcing at reInvent. So
Things you weren't even expecting to be announced suddenly get announced. Like things have been
100%.
kept secret. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So
I'm really looking forward to it.
if you haven't gone, same thing, right? Like highly recommend you go, and it's a great opportunity to meet with other customers.
One day I'd like to go.
Yes. You know what, Doug? We should just go there and just do a podcast, right?
Well, maybe that's I'm just going to say
that's how we do it.
Yeah. Live
from
reInvent.
reInvent. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So
All right, Mark.
cool.
See you next time, bro.
Sounds good. See you.
Bye.
Bye now.